evening. Thanks for the welcome. It's great to be here with Holly and the other artists work that's here from Santa Fe. And I'm going to be speaking about my 16 prints here, Genocide Democracy. But before I begin discussing that work, I want to make some acknowledgments. And I do public art as well. I did a project in Key West with the Art Center in Key West, and also with Art Basel, Miami. So the Tamaqua Nation, Appalachian Nation, Creek Nation, Calusa Nation, Seminole Nation, among many others, I dedicate this talk tonight to those sovereign nations and historic nations of Native people that have come on very hard times. And I live in Oklahoma, so of course the Trail of Tears ended there at Oklahoma. And some of those nations were forced to move, to walk, and leave their lives behind where you live. And they were kicked out of this place called Florida. And many died on the way. When they left, I've been in Georgia quite a bit as well, working in Atlanta, north of Atlanta, Macon, at the pyramids, which I don't call them mounds, I call them pyramids. But when you leave your country as a native sovereign entity, one of the major losses you're going to have is your plants. And if anyone's involved with ceremony here, you can't move ahead without the plants. And so I feel kind of most savvy about that they came to Oklahoma, but they couldn't bring all of the spirits that grow out of the ground to help them. And you can do certain things, bring your songs and you can make your dances, but you don't have your herbs, your certain sacraments that to grow only here, then it's pretty hard to continue your existence. And so the tribes have adapted in Oklahoma, the Yuchi, all the tribes, the Creek nations, all those nations that came out of northern Florida as well. But they don't have the plans that could renew them. And as Cheyenne, that's where I'm from, I'm Cheyenne, Arapaho, but the Cheyenne people were removed from Montana and South Dakota, but we still had the same plans. We still had the same articles to work with. So we're lucky when we lost, the massacres. So anyway, I want to acknowledge those nations and pay homage to them as I come to their territory. As I don't see this as the governor of Florida's territory. This is a sovereign place that's a native place. So I want to start with that acknowledgement. This work here on the wall is a series of 16 monoprints. And I want to talk about the process a little bit to begin with. That it's really a monoprinting process, which means that the work isn't addition, it's not addition. So that every one of these is singular. Everyone is unique, And I probably made, 500 or, maybe 1,000, a couple thousand, I lost count, but I have many, and each one is unique. So I've hand painted each one, And so we start with a plate, a clear plexi plate, and then I'm going to have a drawing from my studio. I'm going to have it researched if it's a historical piece. I'm going to have written 6 words sometimes in my phone, in my Samsung Note 8. I'm a very contemporary guy, so I work with my phone. I can ride anywhere on a jet flying 500 miles an hour or wherever I am on this planet. And so I track my thoughts, and then I go into the studio in Oklahoma City. I've got 2 studios in Oklahoma City. I go in there, I make my sketches. Then I move into a full-scale sketch, the same size as this. This is a 15 by 22. We're working now at 20 by 30, so we're working double the size right now. The ones at MoMA were double the size. But anyway, so I have the sketch the same size as this, and then I go to Santa Fe, or I go to Honolulu, or I go to LA, Santa Monica Boulevard, Josephine Press, or I work with Charlie Cohan in Hawaii, Honolulu, University of Hawaii, John Greco at Josephine Press in LA, and Michael McCabe at Fourth Dimension Press in Santa Fe. So I have 3 presses that I hire, but I'm going to go there, and I take my drawings, and my music and what I needed. So I would go there and take the words, and in order to make these come out facing you in the correct direction, as you might guess, they're all painted backwards. All of these words are painted backwards. So I have to flip over the paper backwards and on a light table. Then I trace it, but I trace it with a clear liquid on clear glass. So it's a very mysterious process. It's called viscosity printing. It's very like alchemy. It's very magical. So I paint backwards on clear glass with a fairly clear liquid of different weights. And then my printer, my master printer, is going to be working on the ink. And we use red, we use blue, we have just a few colors, but we're focusing on. But I'm working with blood in terms of the thematic, visual thematic here is the blood. So we're working with the red in this case, and then we would have him mixing up the red with a big roller, and the roller has to travel 22 inches, to cross this paper. The roller we have now has to travel 30 inches. So you can imagine how big 30 inches is in circumference. It's so large, you've got to push it, and someone's got to push it back. You can't push it and pull it. You have to have two people to push it and pull it. So it's a very, very strenuous process, and the new work of large prints. So he's mixing up the ink, but he's actually putting oil in the ink, and he's gauging the weight of the ink to be with the weight of my oil, and then the kind of day we have, how hot it is, the time of year, also the altitude, how high on the earth we are, how close to the ocean we are, how much moisture there is in the air. So all those variables have to be dealt with. And then once you do that, you move ahead, and if I like it, you start printing with the work. So when you're by the ocean and when you're in Hawaii, it's all very different than in the mountains of New Mexico. So it has to do with the viscosity, the thickness in a sense, or the runniness of that ink. So I would have the plate, and I'm painting on it, and then we're going to ink it up, and go to the press, put the paper down on this, and then we make the print. And in order to make another one like it, I've got to repaint a whole other plate, which I don't want to do. I don't want to do this. It's too much work. It's way too much work. So it's very, very special to make one print, after all that effort with a team of experts that I work with. So that's called viscosity printing, and I'm pretty much focused on that. I also have paintings too, and interventions, work in public art as well. But I want to start talking about the individual prints, and I guess going down to the far end, with Indian Genocide Crown My Good. So the project is called Genocide Democracy, and so this work deals with America and the legacy of genocide that America is built upon. So certainly in my research we've lost maybe 100 million souls in this hemisphere that were indigenous from Columbus's first contact. So that's a lot of, that's not a 9/11 number with the Twin Towers, it's like a lot of people were vanquished from this place. So what I've done with a few of these prints as a nucleus is I've taken American patriotic songs and certain proclamations, and I've sort of unpacked those songs and added them to my imagination or my creativity, and to try to articulate, the hypocrisy, in America, certainly. So with Indian Genocide Crown My Good, so Crown My Good, of course, is a phrase from one of those patriotic messages. Try care, don't insult their beauty. Certainly Native people have to have a lot of trouble trying to live in the country and without being assaulted by tourism or sports mascots or automobile names, or there's a big list of things that are very insulting. So try not to insult the Native community and the Native people is very important. USA born with deep dysfunction, and I'll talk about at the end. There's one here on the far left, but some of that comes forward from all the violence, and so we have in America, as you know, you feel it all every day now. You have major violent events happening almost weekly. And one of my colleagues, he's a very important writer, Sherman Alexie, also a filmmaker, native man from Washington State, but his theory is that really there's so much genocide that America has been built upon from the British, when the British first came, and the French, and the Spanish, and the Russians. There's been so much genocide that America still has a residual tragedy in it, innately in it. That's his theory. There's no Holocaust museum for Native people, so there's no really facing up to that legacy yet. Trade, money, murder, die where it fall. I've done a lot of research about economies, and I have a new project I just finished in San Fe called Columbus Day, and it kind of basically articulates Columbus's voyages and all the violence against the Taino people. But the thought that really the economy is what the USA, the democracy is a capitalist democracy, so it's built on economy, and the economy growing. So whenever the economy starts growing, they call it a recession, and everything's all upset. So it's got to keep growing, and will it grow forever? I'm not sure it will grow forever. Those kinds of things. And even going back to trade, money, murder, who the people we call the Pilgrims, some of you may know that they had a venture capital that was spent on them to come. They were actually kind of front advancement for the colonies, and they came here not for religious freedom, but to be a business to start the colonies, and then to pay the money back to the British upper echelons of moneyed people. So actually they sent them out here with a certain kind of allowance to start the colonies. So again, the trade and the business is really what we're doing primarily. Father, American recruit, able son, returned Indian. So there I find my own, myself being complicit. The tragedy about the issue of genocide and democracy is that you've got to participate in this nation, in the economy, to be a member of it. Right? If you don't participate, you're not going to be noticed. And so Native people are very unnoticed because often they don't participate, maybe because of educational problems or class issues. But my father was an aircraft factory worker. He did come forward from the reservation after Custer's massacres, and eventually got a job he had for 28 years in Wichita, Kansas. And so he was a worker. He was one of the cogs in the wheel of the industry. And that allowed him to raise his family, his 6 kids. And then I came from that experience, and now I've had my life. I sort of call him, he was a recruit. He was a recruit, an American recruit. But then I returned to the reservation. I returned back to Oklahoma. And then now I'm a ceremonial leader of the tribe. So I've changed that over. I'm also a professor, and so on, but I returned to be Native really from that economy that he was able to sustain. We came back to be sovereign. Built 3 forts, Indian never safe. That piece deals with 3 forts in western Oklahoma. And so the Cheyenne had the misfortune to be hunted by the USA, and they were penalized and brutalized by Shivington at the Sand Creek Massacre in southern Colorado. Then they moved from there, from the Fort Wise Treaty to Medicine Lodge Treaty in Kansas, and then later to western Oklahoma, and were given a reservation. But before that, Custer came to assault them and massacre the tribe again. So there were 3 forts built to contain the Cheyenne people. One is Fort Reno, after Captain Reno. One is called Cantonment, and one is called Fort Supply. So there's still 3 towns in Oklahoma that were forts to attack the Cheyenne people. But the point is, with the 3 forts, we were never safe. So it wasn't to help us. Usually forts are thought to be protection, but they were really more aggressive. Burn red people, fire red. And that piece deals more with, again, the genocide. The British, when they came to make the colonies of the British government. In 1637, they started in Connecticut in a big way by Hartford, and they actually attacked the Pequot Nation in the middle of the night. And they burned their village and burned people alive. And the captains wrote little manuscripts of their memoir that had killed the Pequot people. And they called it, they said they were dug in the ground with their flesh. They dung the ground with the Indian flesh. So I made a piece to remember the Pequot people in Connecticut, so that kind of goes back to Connecticut. Far left, police offer of violence, their social counsel. From my observations, I find that today we actually solve social problems with violence. There's a lot of police violence, but the police can't be counselors or welfare workers. They can't go out and get people food stamps, or they can't make equity. So they just solve the violent acts that come toward them, which they're very kind of under a lot of stress, the police. They're very afraid because there's so much violence. And, so in a way, that's how we solve the problems. On the far right, top row, make uterine hats your sport. And that goes back to Shillington, his militia, the Colorado militia, when they attacked the Cheyenne in the St. Creek Massacre. They were so determined to remove the Cheyenne people because the Cheyenne people were actually aggressive toward the USA. They weren't docile, they didn't follow instructions to remove themselves from the land and so forth. So when the soldiers attacked the village, they cut open the women and they wore their uterus on their hats. It was an ornament. And so they wanted to make sure there would be no place for a baby to ever grow again. And so that was something that they perpetrated. And Shillington was actually court-martialed, and he left the military, because he was so brutal. But that was kind of a sport, I guess, in a sense. Vinhall City's gleam, foul, our bloodstream. And Vinhall is the word for white man in Cheyenne. So sometimes I write some Cheyenne words there. White man folly, time is limited. And that piece could also be construed as environmental issues. There's a lot of folly, there's a lot of problems with climate change and so on, and people can't go on forever abusing the planet, so that's important. Red Men wounds red men, of thee I sing, and of thee I sing is one of the lyrics from one of the songs. But also, to be complicit with the violence, I have to be honest and say, the tribes are hurting each other. The reservations are really violent places. There's many murders, many things with children being murdered and hurt by people, pedophilia, and all kinds of horrible things happen when a community is stressed and becomes dysfunctional. So we have that. So we have natives hurting natives also, certainly. Lenape, Muncie, Unami, Delaware. I made that print for Pennsylvania, and I was working in Philadelphia. I went to Title School of Art at Temple University back in the 70s, and I've been honored by the university lately, so I've been back in Philadelphia. But I wanted to just kind of give more of a listing of the Delaware people have that first name, I guess at the bottom of the print, but all the other ones are Delaware too. So, tribes evolve, and we kind of stop them at a certain point, usually at contact. Usually when the non-natives encounter them, then your history begins. It's kind of ridiculous. But you have to back up and see the ingredients. Like even the Seminole aren't just one people. Probably like 6 different nations make the Seminole. But they encountered the white people when they were called Seminoles, so then that's what we call them now. So I try to go back and research some of that and display that. Indians still target Obama, Bin Laden, Geronimo. Some of you may recall that when they killed Bin Laden, they phoned back from Pakistan to the Situation Room where Hillary Clinton and Obama were sitting, and they said Geronimo killed in action. So they had given Bin Laden an Apache name. That was his code name. And they were very happy to report that Geronimo was dead to the President of the United States. So of course that shows you, if you're Apache, that's not very good for you. You're named to the hated terrorists on Earth. So a lot of Native people took issue with that. And Do Not Dance for Pay. That's a print I made particularly for Art in America magazine. I don't know if you've seen that magazine, but I did the cover last year for Art in America. And at the top of the masthead, I flipped America backwards. So it says Art in America backwards, which is a way to see their patch differently. But they commissioned me to make the cover of the magazine. And I wanted to really be very determined to actually call out all the Native arts and to really challenge them to not dance for pay anymore. That we actually, at the University of Oklahoma, where I was a professor for 30 years, back in the 60s, they actually had a human mascot that was Native American that danced at every touchdown at football games. They actually had their own human mascot. It was called Little Red. And finally, eventually they outlawed his existence. He couldn't dance anymore. And that was better for the Native students to see some equality there. Although they still cover a wagon that drives out after every touchdown. They still get guns that shoot off during the football game. So there's still kind of this pioneer spirit that's very offensive. But the dancing for pay has been very much an ineffective pursuit. We didn't get anything done with that, obviously. So my work, in many ways, speaks for defending the Native sovereign world, and I think that's what we should be doing with our efforts. But I put that on the cover of Art in America, and the whole issue that month was about Native American art. And so the editor, Will Smith, asked me to make whatever I wanted, and I made this print, and it's on the cover of Art in America. And the final piece, Fort Supply, Fort Snelling, Fort Hood. At Fort Snelling, some of you might know where that is. It's just outside of Minneapolis, by the airport now. But it goes back to the era of Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Johnson was presidents. And during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was very, very hurtful to the Native people in the Sioux Nation. There was an uprising against the militia in Minnesota, and the tribes there, the Lakota, Dakota people, they were not released the food that they had been promised in their treaty because the Indian agent was not paid by the government. The government was withholding the money, maybe for the Civil War effort. They would not feed the Indian people. It was their treaty right to have the food, but they couldn't leave the residents to hunt. And so it came to a very serious moment where the tribes attacked the man that had the food, killed him, and took the food and fed their families. And then a war ensued. Then it was finally a truce was settled. But after the truce, they gathered 38 Dakota warriors who were leaders of the tribe. They took them to Mankato, Minnesota, and they hung them all. The day after Christmas, the whole leadership of the Dakota Nation were executed. Abraham Lincoln sent out a letter phonetically spelling out their names in Dakota and said, execute these people. And so they killed 38. After Lincoln's assassination, Johnson hung 2 more. So there were 40 warriors that were executed. And you can imagine if you lost, your leadership of your whole government or whatever in one day. And so the Sioux had a lot of trouble recovering, and then they moved to South Dakota. But I did a memorial piece for every warrior that was executed and put it up in Minneapolis. It was up for a year. And the Met Museum in New York City acquired 3 of those panels. And they're up right now in an exhibition called Home as a Foreign Place in New York City on Madison Avenue. So I'm very proud of the Met Museum for supporting that work. They bought that work, now they're showing it in New York City for like 6 or 9 months. So it's important. History to be relayed, and the Met agrees with me. But Fort Snelling was where that happened. Fort Snelling was where the 2 that Johnson hung were executed. And then Fort Supply is where Custer was restocked to attack the Cheyenne people at the Washita Massacre. And then, of course, Fort Hood, you might recall more recently, That's where the shootings were with the Army medical doctor who killed GIs as they were going to go to Iraq. You know. So again, the violence that ensued through the history of this country is continuing, you know, from experiences now even within their own military in this country. So it's a very, very dire circumstance. But I make this work, you know, in the hope and the spirit to heal and to bring awareness and hopefully to right some of these wrongs and to have a much more equitable experience for all of us as citizens together. And I think that's really possible. So thank you.